You really had to be kidding. You are the source of the problem. Why have you not paid for the accommodation? My voice faltering with irritation, I asked. My spouse shot back, because you're the one who left me. Just bring the money here, I insisted. I am not going to do that. It was me that fell behind, he answered coldly. I didn't even want to travel there in the first place. This was simply another day in our failing marriage. I have 7 years of marriage experience with my hubby. The lighthouse of my life is our 6-year-old daughter. The wonderful thing about every single day has been seeing her develop, giggle, and explore the world. Unfortunately, my marriage to my husband has been disintegrating. I chose to stop working when my daughter turned 1. Though it was not a simple choice, I wanted to remain at her side as she developed. But rather than helping me, my husband made it plain that I had to do all the housekeeping by myself should I not be working. I thus did everything. Without aid, I cleaned, cooked, and cared for our infant. I hardly slept when she was a newborn. It was straining. One evening, I requested my husband to help. I felt so tired. I was startled by his answer. Without delay, he said, "If you don't like it, I can divorce you any time." He even showed me a set of finalized divorce documentation. Right in front of me, he placed them in the drawer as though reminding me he might leave whenever he pleased. After that, he would grab those documents and bring up divorce with a disgusted look on his face every time we were in conflict. And last there is my mother-in-law. The individual reared him to see things this way. She is exactly like him, critical and disciplined. She comes over to our house whenever she wants without asking. One day she visited unannounced, opened the fridge, and started eating my daughter's yogurt without even asking. But that wasn't the worst of it. Whenever she came over, she would lecture me endlessly about how a proper wife should behave. She even inspected the corners of my house for dust and criticized me if she found any. Today she came over again. "I have good news for you," she said with a big smile. I didn't trust her at all. "What is it?" I asked cautiously. "What's wrong with you? You should look happier when I'm bringing good news," she snapped. "You're so ungrateful, just like my son says." "Okay, what's the news?" I asked, forcing myself to stay calm. "We're going on a trip," she announced proudly. "Where to?" I asked, confused. "It's your job as the unemployed one to figure that out," she said with a smirk. "Honestly, you're really not very smart, are you? It's such a shame." And just like that, she left me feeling small and defeated once again. "I have a surprise for my son, who works so hard all the time," my mother-in-law announced, looking pleased with herself. "A surprise?" I asked, unsure what she meant. "Yes, let's help him relax and leave behind all his tiredness," she said with a smile. But something in her tone made me feel uneasy. It didn't take long for me to figure out what she meant. My mother-in-law wanted to take her son, my husband, on a trip. The problem? She didn't want to pay for it herself. Instead, she had come up with a plan to invite me and my daughter along. And guess what? She wanted me to cover the entire cost of the trip. Who would want to go on such a trip? Certainly not me. Besides, we simply couldn't afford it. "Let's make it a grand trip," she added cheerfully, acting as if money wasn't an issue. "No, I never said I was going," I replied firmly. "Let me think about this for a while," I added, trying to end the conversation without upsetting her further. That evening, my husband came home from work in a terrible mood. I immediately knew why. My mother-in-law must have called him and told him about our conversation. "I heard you disobeyed my mother today," he said, confronting me as soon as he stepped through the door. "I was just telling her the truth," I replied, feeling defensive. "What truth? That we can't take her on vacation?" he asked, his voice rising. "That's right. We don't have that kind of money," I admitted, feeling the heavy weight of our financial situation pressing down on me. But he wasn't ready to listen. My mother said it was a surprise. She already told me about the trip. What's the surprise in this? I asked, frustrated. If we can't manage our finances, how are we supposed to afford a trip? It's your fault we can't manage the money, he snapped. How am I supposed to manage money that we don't even have? I shot back. Are you trying to say that I don't make enough? He asked, clearly offended. Well, it's not exactly much, I said, unable to hold back my honesty. You've got to be kidding me, he grumbled. Anyway, I'm going on this trip. You need to plan everything. That's an order, and if you can't do it, we're getting a divorce. His words cut deep. I felt my heart sink. I might as well get a divorce now, I muttered quietly under my breath. But as frustrated as I was, one thought kept me from saying more. What will my daughter think? She was the only reason I hadn't walked away already. In the end, I found myself searching for hotels and trying to plan the trip. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I wasn't even sure about going on the trip, but my mother-in-law kept insisting. After talking with my husband, she became even pickier about her demands. I want a room with an open-air bathtub, she declared, and the meals must be the most luxurious ones at the hotel. Her requests seemed endless. I couldn't help but wonder how much all of this would cost. But if I didn't meet her demands, I knew what would happen. I'd be met with another storm of sarcasm and criticism. It felt like I had no choice but to give in, even though it frustrated me deeply. Finally, I decided to take a bold step. I shamelessly went ahead and fulfilled all of her requests. But the way I managed it wasn't something she expected. When my mother-in-law found out everything was arranged just the way she wanted, she became oddly tense and annoyed. This is all thanks to my mom, she said, saying something that didn't make much sense. But I ignored it. That evening, during dinner, my husband started one of his usual lectures. He had this habit of scolding me over the smallest things. But after 5 years of dealing with it, I had become almost immune. I let him talk and didn't even bother responding. Thankfully, he never used sarcasm or harsh words in front of our daughter. It seemed like he didn't want her to see that side of him, which gave me some relief. The day of the trip finally came. I found myself sitting in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. Of course, I was the one who rented the car and naturally the one doing all the driving. My husband sat comfortably in the passenger seat, acting like he owned the car. In the back seat, my mother-in-law kept talking to herself about souvenirs she wanted to buy, completely ignoring my daughter, who was trying to get her attention. I drove all morning without a single offer of help from either of them. No one asked if I needed a break or if I was tired. Finally, we stopped at a service area because my daughter needed to use the restroom. I quickly took her, relieved for a moment to stretch my legs, and hurried back to the parking lot. But when we returned, the car was gone. I froze, my heart pounding as I looked around the lot. The car was nowhere to be seen. Feeling panicked, I called my husband. He didn't pick up. Next, I tried calling my mother-in-law. You two took too long, she said with a laugh, her tone cold and uncaring. So we left. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had actually left us behind. I tried to explain what had happened, but she wasn't interested. It was clear they had no intention of coming back for us. I stood there, holding my daughter's hand, wondering what I was going to do next. I had only gone to the bathroom for a few minutes. But when I called my husband to find out why he left, his voice cut through the phone with anger. "This is your fault," he said coldly. "You didn't listen to me. You have no right to go on this trip. Was this your plan all along? If so, what now?" I felt my heart sink, but he wasn't done. "I'm fine, but what about Carol? She's turning out just like you. Too cocky. She even talked back to my mom when she complained about you. She needs to be punished too." I was stunned. My daughter, Carol, had only stood up for me, and now he wanted to punish her for that. But he added, Since she was looking forward to this trip, I might think about it again when you both apologize. If you understand, you can go home now." Before I could respond, he hung up the phone. Stood there in shock, holding the phone in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other. What was I supposed to do now? I realized how far we were from home. "Mom, are you okay? Did Dad and Grandma leave us?" Carol asked, her small voice breaking the tense silence. I knelt down to her level and forced a smile. "I guess so, sweetheart. They're so mean, aren't they?" she asked. "Yeah, I think so too," I said softly. "Are we going home?" she asked, tilting her head. I hesitated. "Yes, but you were really looking forward to this trip." She smiled sweetly. "Only because I was with you, Mom. If you're going home, I'll go home too." Her words warmed my heart. "Then let's go on an adventure instead," I said, trying to make the best of the situation. "An adventure." Carol's eyes lit up, her carefree smile bringing me a sense of peace. I called my friend Nicole, who lived nearby, and told her everything that had happened. Without hesitation, she came to pick us up and drove us home. Later that evening, after Carol had fallen asleep, Nicole and I sat down to talk. "So, what are you going to do now?" Nicole asked, concern in her eyes. I took a deep breath. "I think I'm getting a divorce." Nicole nodded. "That's a good decision. You've put up with this for far too long." "Yeah," I said, feeling a strange sense of relief. "And I don't want Carol to grow up with a father who harms her emotionally anymore." The next morning, I signed the divorce papers that had been sitting in the drawer for years. Nicole filled in the witness box, and ironically, my mother-in-law's name was already written in the other box. Thanks to that, I was able to file the papers immediately. 5 days after returning home, my phone rang. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. After dropping my daughter off at kindergarten, I got a call from my husband. His tone was sharp and angry. "You've got to be kidding me. You're the one causing all the problems. Why haven't you paid for the hotel accommodation?" he demanded. "Because you're the one who left me behind," I shot back. "You should have paid for it in advance." "Oh, really?" he sneered. "And why does it cost $10,000? That's ridiculous." "It costs that much because it includes all the special requests your dear mother made," I replied sarcastically. "You and your mother had a great time there, so why don't you split it? That would be $6,000 each." There was silence for a moment. Then I heard a woman's voice in the background. She sounded frustrated, likely someone from the hotel asking for payment. "I'll call the police if you don't pay," the woman warned. "No problem," my husband responded smugly. "My wife will pay. She's on her way here right now." The woman's voice grew colder. "Where is your wife now?" she asked. "At home," my husband answered casually. The woman's tone sharpened. "I checked her address, and it seems like your wife is far from home. Didn't you leave her at a service area? And now you're telling her to come and pay." My heart swelled with gratitude when I realized who the woman was. She continued, her voice now directed at him. "Excuse me, your wife and I have been friends since high school. I was the one who picked her and your daughter up from the service area after you abandoned them. She was Nicole, my old friend and someone I could always count on. Had called her when I was stranded asking for help with the trip. What I didn't know was that Nicole owned a hotel. When I explained my situation, she surprised me by offering us her hotel accommodation for free. "You don't have to worry about paying," Nicole had told me at the time. "It's the least I can do for you." I was shocked. Back in high school, Nicole had struggled with her future. Her family owned a well-known hotel, but she had different dreams. As the only daughter, she felt obligated to take over the business, even though it wasn't what she wanted. I had been her shoulder to lean on, encouraging her to follow her heart. Though she ended up managing the hotel, she told me she never forgot how much I supported her during that difficult time. She felt like she owed me a favor and saw this as the perfect opportunity to repay me. I told your husband there's no payment needed, Nicole said firmly. But he clearly doesn't care about you. I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. Nicole's kindness reminded me that there were still good people in my life, even as I prepared to let go of my marriage. I don't have a personal connection with you, Nicole said firmly. In other words, you're just hotel guests. Since you're only guests, I'd like you to pay the full price for your stay. My husband, caught off guard, tried to argue. All right, look, why don't you put it on your credit card for now, and I'll charge it to my wife later? Nicole wasn't having it. I don't want to do that, she replied calmly. It's not that you don't want to, Nicole added with a sharp tone. It's that you can't. Isn't that right? My husband's face went pale. Wait, what do you mean? He stammered. Well, Nicole explained, your salary is $3,500 a month, and your credit card limit can't be more than $6,000. Isn't that correct? My husband stood frozen, unable to respond. Nicole turned to me. He said you're lying about his income. He claimed he had a great salary. I sighed. He's a salesman. He gets incentives when he makes a big sale, but most of the time he only gets the minimum guaranteed salary. He brags about his income, but the truth is it's nowhere near enough to pay for something like this. Nicole wasn't impressed. Don't tell me you're planning to pay for this out of savings, she said, looking at him sharply. No way, I said before he could speak. That money is for divorce costs, child support, and alimony. What are you talking about? My husband snapped, his voice rising. I filed for divorce, I said, standing tall. You've been threatening me with divorce for years, remember? You always said you'd divorce me any time. Well, I finally did it. I submitted the papers as fast as I could. He looked stunned. Wait, what? You're serious? Yes, and since we're not married anymore, I don't owe you anything. Not now. Not ever. My husband had no choice but to promise Nicole he would pay the hotel bill in installments. After that, I contacted an attorney to formally file for custody of my daughter, child support, and alimony. I packed up our belongings and took my daughter back to my parents' house, where we started fresh. Ironically, one of the regular guests at Nicole's hotel was an executive for my husband's company. When he found out about the situation, he ordered my ex-husband to pay the full hotel bill immediately. As for my mother-in-law, she was furious when she discovered how little her son earned. She called me, begging me to reconsider the divorce. She wanted her son to support her in the future and couldn't believe I'd actually left him. My ex-husband also called me, insisting that Carol needed a father and that we should remarry. I ignored him. Now my daughter and I are happily living with my parents. Carol is smiling more than ever, and I feel free for the first time in years. There's no way I'm going back to that life. I don't even know what my ex-husband is talking about anymore. He says our daughter needs him, but he never really took care of her anyway. After the divorce, he moved back into his mother's house. At work, things aren't going well for him either. He's not a good planner, so he waited until the last minute to apply for vacation time for that trip. On top of that, the company executive found out about how he couldn't even pay for the hotel. Now, his performance and financial issues are common knowledge at work, and he's feeling embarrassed and small. Meanwhile, my life is finally moving in the right direction. Next weekend, my daughter and I are going to stay at Nicole's hotel, the same hotel she runs. It's nice to have something to look forward to, especially since I've also started a new job. It's been years since I last worked, but going back to work has been so fulfilling. It's nothing like the draining and one-sided marriage I had. I feel productive and free, building a better future for myself and my daughter. I used to think it was better for children to grow up with both parents under the same roof, but I've learned that's not always true. In our case, it was far better to leave. What really matters is having happy parents who can raise their children in a healthy environment. This divorce has taught me so much. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I now understand, most importantly, that my daughter will always come first. Whatever obstacles arise, I know I will always do my best for her. Having her at my side helps me to feel capable of anything. Her happiness and strength are my greatest sources. Her grin reminds me every day that leaving a poisonous marriage was the wise option I took. I wonder occasionally from where people find their confidence, that of my ex-husband. Even when he is obviously in the wrong, he behaves so entitled and sure of himself. Perhaps it's a facade to cover his fears. Perhaps it's only a facade for his insecurity. Either way, I no longer give a damn about it. The best choice I have ever made was divorcing. It allowed me the flexibility to reconstruct my life and offer a better future to my kid. I can really say right now that I'm happy. My daughter, Nicole's encouraging friends, and the second opportunity I have been given all help me. From now on, I want for the two of us a quiet and content life. Nothing less is what my daughter deserves, so I will make sure she has the love, protection, and encouragement she needs to flourish.